So I guess now is the right time to start. Before we officially open the event, let me share with you a few technical details on the event. This webinar will be recorded, dear participants, so just keep it in mind. And please set your microphones on mute that we don't disturb our presentation today. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand or write it in the chat. You can see below on the right side. And also use the discussion panel after the presentation. Mr. Jackie Tan will very gladly answer your questions you have on this session. So let me give the word right now to Mr. Petr Kompala, Executive Director of AHK Slovakia. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Martina, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many participants for this important topic. It's not a new topic. In fact, it was 2011 that the concept of Industry 4.0 came up first, and so it's already 10 years. Yet still, we believe there's some potential, especially not only for manufacturing, but especially lifting cross-border potential, and the entire concept of connecting things from the raw material to the recycling of the product. I think there's still some room, because there are challenges, and this is what we'd like to talk and discuss about today. And I'm very glad that we have Mr. Jackie Tan as a guest today, as an expert who will share a few insights with us. He's the head of digital services at TÜV SÜD. And I'd also like to take the opportunity and thank TÜV SÜD for the great cooperation, especially Mr. Miroslav Tursa, who organized everything with us. This is really a long-term cooperation that we really appreciate. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues in the region, especially my counterpart, the Executive Director of the German Czech Chamber of Commerce in Prague, Bernard Bauer, and as well as my colleague in Slovenia who supported the event, because this is not only that we see potential in German-Slovak relations. I think if you look at the connections you have in the region, it's a regional topic, and it's great that we do that together. And by that, I'd like to wish everyone a productive and fruitful event, and hand over the word to Bernard Bauer, or back to you, Martina. What's the...
To Bernard Bauer, please.
Okay, perfect. Bernard, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone from Prague. Dear Mr. Tan, dear Peter, thank you for this introduction. And I'm really very happy about having the opportunity to welcome you to this, I think, very useful workshop. And I would like to thank all colleagues in Bratislava for this initiative, as well as TÜV SÜD, our member company. We at the German Czech Chamber of Commerce are focused intensively since 2015 focused on the digitalization topics, when we started our initiative Industry 4.0 with the slogan Shaping Revolution. And as you know, Industry 4.0 brings complete digitization and networking of all stages of the value chain. And this means radical change in large and small companies of all industrial sectors. And this change has been going on for a number of years now, as Peter said, since 2011. Innovation, customer communication, flexibility, productivity, and time to market are being redefined. And Industry 4.0 is changing the industrial production step by step, and there is always a risk of acting too slowly, of losing valuable competitive advantages. And when we started our initiative in 2015, at that time we realized that Germany tried quite systematically and at an early stage to sound out what the changes of a digitized industry in order to be in a position to define standards that were as global as possible. And we are pleased here in our office here in Prague that we were able to inspire the Czech government at that time to draft a strategy for Industry 4.0 and to initiate a cooperation agreement between our two countries. So there's a study of the European Commission, which is called Transition to Industry 4.0 in the Visegrad countries, which was done in June last year. And it comes to the conclusion that the V4 countries are not fully prepared for the Industry 4.0 transition, as the 4 countries had lower labor costs compared to the older member states. There was less pressure to make a full transition. And recent studies suggest that the share of jobs likely to be automated in the V4 is higher than the EU average. So I think there's a lot to be discussed today, and I'm very thankful that Mr. Tan will give us an overview now, and I wish you all a fruitful and inspiring workshop. And the floor is yours, Mr. Tan. Thank you very much.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Bauer and Mr. Capella, for your introductions. And once again, good morning, all audience from the course. I have a few slides I'd like to share with everyone. So I'll request if Ms. Ludmila can share the screen, please.
Of course. Just a second. Is it working?
Perfect. Thank you very much. So once again, in my presentation today, I'm going to share with you our perspective of Industry 4.0. Of course, how companies start to get ready their factories, the organization towards adopting Industry 4.0. And at the same time, I'm going to share with you the evolutions of manufacturing. Next slide, please. Now, in my presentation today, I have 5 topics that I would like to share with everyone. It's really about digital transformations in manufacturing, how companies catalyze their Industry 4.0 transformation journey, the standards of Industry 4.0, which is the Smart Industry Readiness Index, or bracket SIRI, is a standard that we work very closely with Singapore government and of course with the World Economic Forum. Next point will be on the Industry 4.0 Enablement Program, how companies leverage SIRI to adopt or even to kickstart their Industry 4.0 transformation journey. And finally, I'm going to share with you a case study that we help companies in Singapore actually to help them in terms of adopting Industry 4.0 and effectively transforming their companies to be more competitive in this landscape. Next slide, please. Now, in digital transformations for manufacturing, in my next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, in the next slide, what we see right now is that based on our research together with the World Economic Forum, we believe that there's a value potential of USD 3.7 trillion value creation potential in 2025. There's now emerging of Industry 4.0 concepts with lean manufacturing. If you are from manufacturing industry, typically we know that we apply the lean principles for being more effective, for being more proactive in terms of manufacturing perspective. Now, at the same time, we do see that companies right now are adopting the concept of Industry 4.0, the relevant technology of Industry 4.0, ultimately to create the right business case, the right, let's say, productivity gains for the organizations. That is about step change in terms of the adoptions of the different technology. At the same time, we do see that for every 1 worker in manufacturing, there's 5 new employees hired elsewhere, economics, education perspective, or even all the way to the industry where you are working from. And this is really the highest multiplication factor of every economic sector that we see so far. So we do see that the digitalization of production sector will transform manufacturing companies globally. Supply chain has to come closer together. Materials have to be on the right quality. And of course, the production planning must be always on the, let's say, right planning at every given situations. Next slide, please. If you can just scroll across all, Ludmila, just share all the observations. Press next, please. Yep, let's continue to all the way to the end. Yeah, thank you. So based on our observations so far, when we started this Industry 4.0 project in Singapore, we have this opportunity to work with 300 companies globally. That includes companies from Singapore, companies from the European sites, for example, Germany, companies in Japan, of course, companies in USA, and companies in China. So when we did this 300 assessments for our clients, we do see that there are 6 key observations in this whole transformation journey. So probably you will need to keep in mind how do you manage all the 6 as part of your transformation. Number 1, we do see that there's a fragmented leaderships. There's no common understanding of Industry 4.0, and typically every department run on their silo. So every department have their own initiative, and they all have their own understanding of Industry 4.0. And often their projects, the initiative are being led with a proper executive support. So it's really a very fragmented leadership team driving Industry 4.0 transformation. So keep in mind that as part of your strategy for Industry 4.0 adoptions, there must be an element of understanding of training before you build on the right roadmap or even business case. Second point, we do see that existing IT and OT, information technology and operation technology landscape could be very difficult for digital implementations due to legacy equipment. So keep in mind that not just adopting the best, let's say, AI solutions, the best AR solutions, you're going to look into how is your current infrastructures being designed to adopt new technology and even to adopt new, let's say, processes at a go. So keep in mind that you do look into how do you manage your existing IT infrastructure. The third point, technology focus. Very often we see companies right now focusing on implementing technology as different to really look into resolving a specific problems or even upskilling the workforces. So keep in mind that it's not just implementing the right technology, but of course do look into how do you get your workforce to be ready, to be upskilled, to be trained, to operate the right technology at any given time. And of course, there must be a specific business challenges or even a specific strategy that you're trying to achieve. So not just implement technology for the sake of technology, right? We look into how would that resolve your existing or any planned strategic goals. And the fourth point on lack of solid business case. Now, very often we see companies implement solutions in a very piloted approach, a small scale approach, but they struggle to really scale it across the factory. This is why we see that companies really do not have a proper or solid business case, the right return on investment for the implementation. So when you perform any project implementations, keep in mind that it must be scalable, and keep in mind that it must be spread across the whole factory and not just for specific, let's say, pain points or specific pilot implementation. There must be a visions to scale these solutions across the factories. The fifth point, lack of a clear roadmap. I think this is very often we see in many organizations. There's no roadmap for Industry 4.0. It's all tactical or operational solutions. So we do recommend that if, as part of the Industry 4.0 transformation journey, there's a need to redesign your roadmap, and the roadmap must really be scalable with the right, let's say, process, the right technology, and the right organization to be in place. And finally, lack of change management. I think this is also one of the key challenges we see in Singapore or even in some countries. There's ineffective organizational change management, and that becomes white elephants, right? You implement solutions, but the solutions stay there for a couple of months, and that's it. It becomes a white elephant for operational needs. So do keep in mind that in various organizations, bring organization in place when you're trying to really adopt or implement Industry 4.0 solutions. So here you go. These are the 6 key points that we recommend company to keep an eye when you want to go towards digitalizations. Next slide, please. Now, Catalyst Industry 4.0 transformation journey. Next slide, please. Now, in this overview, I just want to keep a quick overview for you about what is actually Industry 4.0. Some of you may be aware about what is Industry 4.0, but I thought this is an opportunity for me to share with you how we TÜV SÜD define or even describe Industry 4.0. Now, we see that Industry 4.0 establishes a hyper connectivity that goes beyond the shop floor, where automations and interacting does not only happen within the factory environments, but along the value chain, extending to suppliers and customers, finally addressing the entire product lifecycle. There are 3 keywords here: hyper connectivity, value chain, and product lifecycle. When we speak about hyper connectivity, this is not just about your factory being connected. It's about how connected you are towards your value chains, right? What we mean by value chains, it's very simple. If you look into a classical lean manufacturing, when you try to improve your operations, there are 5 M you talk about: your materials, your man, your machines, your method, and of course your measurements. This 5M is always being considered as part of any manufacturing operations. So when we speak about hyper-connectivity, it's about how do you connect these 5M together as a whole, digitally, right? Not just relying on certain, let's say, templates or even an Excel spreadsheet, but digitally, how do you connect these 5 value chain as a one? Now that link to us to the next keyword, value chain. Now, value chain is not just your operation needs, it's about also your suppliers and your customers, and finally addressing the entire product life cycle. So your product design, your product engineering, your product manufacturing, your product recycling or even disposal, and of course customers requirements. So keep in mind that how do you manage your product life cycle at every stage of the value chains, ultimately linking to the hyper connectivity of the organization. Next slide, please. Now, if you were to look into really about what could be the key features of Industry 4.0, within the source from Industry 4.0, there are 6 key features. If you can go through all of them, please, thank you. There are 6 key features that I really recommend here. Number 1, flexible productions, comfortable factory, customers-oriented solutions, optimized logistic, use of data, and finally, resource-efficient circular economy. Now, in the first key point, flexible productions, we do see that companies now always operate under what we call a high-mix, low-volume operations. Right? This is still the fact that very often it's not about having the right volume and we just push all the way to the end. It's also about having a high-mix, low-volume operation. This is where we do see that when you design your factory or when you improve your factory, keep in mind that how we will achieve what we call a flexible production, such that your operations, your machines, your labor is able to be flexible enough to operate within the right environments, to be more flexible, to cater to more product type. And typically we speak about bill of materials. How do you have multiple bill of materials and how do you manage it? Second point, comfortable factory. This is where we talk about how companies can rebuild their factory lines in modular approach and be assembled quickly when needed. If you look into a classical, let's say, automotive manufacturing, this is a good example. It's always fixed lines, right? That's how they design a factory line, and that's the way it is designed. But if you look into very often, let's say, a future-oriented factory lines, they are modular enough, they can be reconfigured easily. The workforce are being trained to reconfigure easily within the modular approach for productions or even for assembly. Third point, customers-oriented solutions. Now, when we design product, we got to be closer to the customers. It's not just about, we think this is the best product, a customer will buy. But it's also about how do you get customers' feedback faster and how can you react to customer feedback in the right, let's say, approach, right? And no longer companies or customers are looking into giving you feedback manually. They may want a digital platform whereby they can communicate with you and give you feedback accordingly. So it's about more customers-oriented solutions. Optimize logistics. So we spoke about a supply chain platform. Very often, you look into global MNC, they're looking into how can they deploy the supply chain platform to manage the suppliers, but of course to manage your internal supply chain, because as a multinational company, not just they are looking into external suppliers, they have their internal suppliers they have to manage. So there's a need to really adopt the right supply chain platform to optimize the logistic area. Use of data. I think this is very clear. We always talk about data-driven manufacturing. And typically what we see is that companies now uses data to make decisions. Company uses data to really make decisions faster and to redesign the operations. And some even uses data to really make use of artificial intelligence to enable predictive manufacturing or even predictive maintenance. So keep in mind that data is always very, let's say, fundamentals when it comes to Industry 4.0, right? And this data must be at least digital for any companies to react on. So getting data digital, getting data integrated across the organizations. Last but not least, resource efficient circular economy. So the entire life cycle of a product, from raw materials to end product, there's a need that we look into sustainability, right? I mean, this is a very crucial topic right now at this moment of time. So we look into companies, when you design your factory or when you upgrade a factory, how would you really look into what we call green building or even resource efficient circular economy as part of your entire product lifecycle design? Next slide, please. Now, when we come into Industry 4.0 transformation, we do see companies go through 3 steps of their transformation. Step number one is initiations. We do see that companies right now really wanting to develop and individualize understanding of Industry 4.0, meaning what and where could Industry 4.0 bring me the best benefits. Secondly, we do see companies wanted to create baselines. They would like to know where they are today and what are the gaps, right? Without knowing where you are today, you can't really improve in a stepwise fashion. So typically with this, we do see companies really starting their journey in this three-step approach with initiations. Number two, solutioning. This is where we do see companies now, once they have designed their baselines, they understand the gaps towards Industry 4.0, they start to design what we call define targeted future steps or even visions that links to their roadmap or even a business case, right? There's now a future state, there's now a vision for their factory of the future. At the same time, as part of the solutioning, companies will also determine what are the business impact that makes sense for them, what is the return on investments for that specific roadmap, and finally, who could be the solutions and the vendors that make sense to achieve my roadmap for Industry 4.0 transformations. Last point on step number three, once the companies have decided the roadmap, they also identify the right vendors and solutions. This is where they start to implement these solutions in a scalable approach. It must be integrated to their, let's say, existing infrastructure or new infrastructure. Ultimately, it must be safe, secure, and reliable solutions, meeting the performance targets, and of course, the key, let's say, business goal. So typically, this is how we see companies go into their transformation journey. In today's presentation, I'll give you more information about step one, just to give you the insights how company initiates their Industry 4.0 transformation journey. Next slide, please. Now, first of all, SIRI, or we call it the Smart Industry Readiness Index. This product or this service is what we started back in 2017 together with Singapore government. The idea of SIRI is to serve as an international standard for companies to really start their Industry 4.0 transformation journey. And last year, together with the World Economic Forum, we have established SIRI to be the standards. And there's partners together to really help companies to implement Industry 4.0. And of course, there's TÜV SÜD, there's Siemens, and there's McKinsey. So if you were to search more information, they will find more about Smart Industry Readiness Index. And today, I'll also give you more insights about what is SIRI as a topic. All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Now, let's jump into Industry 4.0 transformation standards, SIRI. Next slide, please. Now, the SIRI itself was created by Singapore government in partnership with TÜV SÜD back in 2017. Ultimately, SIRI comprises of two frameworks to help companies to start, scale, and sustain their manufacturing transformation journey. Why we say two frameworks? Number one is more a current state assessment, or we can call it maturity assessment. That's the first framework. The second framework is more gap analysis. All right, so SIRI itself comprises of Industry 4.0 maturity assessments, and of course, gap analysis. Within the SIRI framework, it covers three core elements of Industry 4.0, namely process, technology, and organization. So I'll go into that details later on, but just keep in mind that we always cover three areas: process, technology, and organizations. Next slide, please. Now, SIRI itself, as I mentioned, it helps companies to start, scale, and sustain the transformation initiative. Ultimately, it serves as three key principles. Number one, it helps companies to understand what is Industry 4.0 and what are the tangible benefits it can yield for the company. Secondly, SIRI helps companies to evaluate the current maturity level and, of course, the current, let's say, manufacturing facility performance. Third point, it also helps companies to really improve in a targeted and stepwise fashion, such that you know what could be your next step when we do the gap analysis. Within the framework itself, as I mentioned, we cover process, technology, and organizations. Within the process block itself, we actually look into the company's operations, let's say, performance management. We also look into the supply chain integrations and, of course, product life cycle. So we actually look into the maturity of these three aspects. In technology, that's where we look into the specific automations of the factory, the specific connectivity of factory, and of course, the specific, let's say, intelligence level of the factory. So you can see it covers quite a full range of your technology readiness level. Not only technology and process, SIRI itself also look into how a company's performs in terms of their structure and management and the talent readiness for the company. So there's a level of change management that we actually want to embed to the clients. It's not just about having the right process, the right technology. There's a need to make sure that there's the right structure and management, the right workforce management is in place for Industry 4.0 transformations. Next slide, please. Yeah, so with that being said, there are 16 data points that companies will have to go through when they start what we call the SIRI assessment. So it's not really let's say a 1 month project. It's actually a 2 days assessment with a company, and that will cover the whole 16 points in terms of operations, as I mentioned, especially vertical integrations, horizontal integrations, and of course integrated product life cycle. That's for the process block. For technology block, companies will then experience about how could future shop floor automation look like, how could future connectivity for shop floor look like, and of course, what could intelligence look like for organizations, and that will link to the enterprise and of course the facilities. So shop floor is really the core manufacturing processes. Enterprise is really the core, let's say the office processes, can be planning, scheduling, or even HR processes. And facility is really the building, whereby we talk about sustainability. We also talk about green management for the building. So that's where the full holistic approach of the automations, connectivity, and intelligence that a company will experience. And finally, in organizations, company will actually get into 4 different chapters of organization, namely workforce learning and development, leadership competency, intra-company collaborations, and finally strategy and governance. So they'll get experience what are the different level of strategy is in place for that company. In my next slide, if I'm not wrong, you will get experience about how we conduct one dimension, one of the 16s. So next slide, please. Yeah, here we go. So this is a classical assessment for one factory, and we look into their existing operation management. So with every dimensions, there will be 6 selections from 0 to 5. And in this example here, 0 is undefined, whereby we say that the operation management is really undefined. It all based on individual experience or individual, let's say, knowledge when you try to manufacture a product. Next level, please, on band 1. So on level 1, we do see that right now companies have a defined approach. There's a standard operating procedure for the companies to operate on. There is also what we call, let's say, a manual that companies can refer to, and there's also a production planning. So there's a very standardized approach when they manufacture product. However, the informations are using analog tools. Analog tools could be pen and paper, Microsoft Excel, email, or even phone call. So pretty much they have a defined processes, but they use analog tool to run the operations. That's on level 1. On level 2, that's on digital. Right now, we do see companies now have applied element of digital tools to run the operation. For example, manufacturing execution systems, or even human-machine interface, or even SCADA, PLC to run their operations. Largely, we do see that the factory run on the digital platforms or digital technology to manufacture products. That will be on band 2. Band 3, please. On level 3, integrated. Now, this is where we see that companies may have different assets, different equipment, maybe one from Bosch, one from Siemens, one from Schneider, and maybe even solutions from SAP. Different systems, different vendors, but they are able to integrate and communicate with one another. Basically, information between the different assets, the different vendors are able to exchange information to really having this integrated approach for better, let's say, production planning. That's on band 3. On level 4, please. And level 4, this is where we see companies can really run the, let's say, operations unmanned, or we can call it a green button process or lights out factory for their operation. So that's band 4. And on level 5, that's where intelligence. This is where we do see that companies right now not just having the right integrated automated factory. There's element of intelligence being in place, the element of data that are being used to go into specific application. For example, predictive maintenance, real-time information, performance management, or even augmented AR, VR technology for specific needs of the operation. So it's quite an intelligence based on data for the operations. So this is typically one example when we go through, let's say, a maturity assessment with a company from 0 to 5. Next slide, please. I believe there's also another survey form that we sent to you. You will see, actually, let us know where do you see your factory or your company's level is at from 0 to 5. Now, in this slide, I just want to share with you, upon a company completed the SIRI assessment with any of the, let's say, certified assessor, they'll be able to go into results, or they'll receive results on where they are today in the blue lines. The green circle represents their focus area as part of the algorithm that we built. So there's a specific algorithm that we built within our, let's say, portal, whereby we do benchmarking. We get into specific companies, let's say performance target, your KPI, your key performance indicator, even your business profile. Within this data we collected from you, as part of this whole assessment, we will be able to provide you a very structured, a very, let's say, tangible benefits, tangible results that you can work on as part of your Industry 4.0 transformation. The image on the right-hand side is pretty much give you awareness about where you are comparing to your peers in the same industry. So for example, if you are from the automotive industry, you are able to see how you are performing to your peers in the specific, let's say, dimensions, all the 16 dimensions. So this is a typical sample result from a SIRI assessment. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to bring you to our next service, which is called Industry 4.0 Enablement Program. So as you know that SIRI itself is an international standard, which is being driven by the Singapore government and together with the World Economic Forum. We have, from TÜV SÜD perspective, we actually help companies in the context of Industry 4.0 Enablement Program. So it's really enable workforce, enable organization like yourself to really start onto Industry 4.0 journey. Next slide, please. So the objective of the Industry 4.0 Enablement Program is to help companies to acquire and gain knowledge of Industry 4.0 and related technology within the industry. Secondly, we actually help companies experience to evaluate the future of manufacturing and, of course, best practices. And finally, as part of this whole, let's say, Industry 4.0 Enablement Program, we will actually help companies to really lead and architect the future step of your organizations with a clear next step. So there's an element of high-level roadmap for you to work on as part of your Industry 4.0 transformation journey. Next slide, please. Now, within this outline, I just want to give you a quick overview. The program itself is actually a 5-day program where companies will experience with 2 consultants or 2 Industry 4.0 consultants to really help you to understand your maturity, your gap analysis, and of course, identify area of focus with relevant best practices information. Although it's a 5-day program, but there's a specific engagement hours per day. So that it's not very condensed, and you're able to experience, especially individual day, an element of Industry 4.0 that should lead to day number 5, whereby you should be able to understand your results of your factory or your company performance, including identify area of focus, and at the same time, there'll be a challenge, let's say, requirements for you to understand what are the best practices and relevant use cases. So just to give you an overview about the outline of the program. Next slide, please. Now, within this whole journey of Industry 4.0 Enablement Program, companies really get to understand what is Industry 4.0, specific Industry 4.0 for your company. And at the same time, you have experienced SIRI to use it for your organization to understand your readiness level, have the chance to really prioritize what are your focus area when it comes to the SIRI assessment, not just focusing on everything, what are really your top priorities area. And finally, you get to recognize what are the specific relevant and even latest technology that could be applicable for your organizations. So not just an assessment per se, it's really an assessment plus recommendations about what could be possible for your organization as part of this whole program. Next slide, please. Now, deliverables within this program, companies will receive 3, let's say, results. Number 1, they receive an official SIRI assessment report, which is endorsed by the World Economic Forum and, of course, SIRI. Companies will also get insights about what could be the right technology and what are the case studies the companies can use as a reference. So as part of this program, there will be recommendations about what could make sense for your organizations and sharing of certain case study for your company. And of course, you will be, let's say, awarded with a certificate of completion from TÜV SÜD as part of this journey. Next slide, please. And this one sample result, as I mentioned, is really about where they are today, what are the focus area, and where they can work on. So this is just one sample results of the enablement program together with SIRI. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned just now in the beginning, we have actually conducted approximately 300 companies right now all over the world, very much focusing in Singapore, but we have actually experts all over the globe. And in fact, I think in Europe, we have about 10 certified assessors to help companies really understand Industry 4.0 and of course, provide the right recommendations for you to embark on your Industry 4.0 transformation journey. Next slide, please. Now, today I just want to give you an example of a case study where we help companies, starting with SIRI all the way to roadmap and implementations. Next slide, please. The client itself is actually established F&B industry. Globally, it's not from Singapore, it's actually a F&B industry. What the company would like to do is really to expand the product portfolio and customer base. So they're not just looking into just specific product, they would like to innovate or re-innovate the organization to secure, let's say, a bigger share within the F&B industry. SIRI result was used actually to help companies to establish a factory roadmap and of course supply chain as integration. So we actually help the companies with SIRI assessment, but ultimately designing the new factory roadmap and their supply chain integrations. Challenges when we did these assessments with the clients, we understand that the companies that they actually may share with us that the customers' expectations requires them to be very flexible and shorter their response time, because very often when a customer provides feedback, it took them quite some time to react or even to respond to that. So that was the first challenges they want to resolve. Second challenges, they really need to get into supply chain transparency. Simply, there's a bottleneck in all the raw material suppliers, and they would like to really have a better transparency. I mentioned the word supply chain control tower, so that's something that you may keep in mind, that the companies actually use the supply chain control tower to manage their supply chains to have better visibility of their raw materials. Third point, there's also a need for sustainable and automated manufacturing and storage, not just classical racking systems. There's the need for a more sustainable and automated manufacturing and storage systems. Finally, of course, as I mentioned, there's really challenges in terms of their customer and management's productivity. Now, within the whole SIRI assessment, we can see the company results in the blue lines or the blue dots. That's where they are today. They are very much in the basic level for process and technology, but they do have the right mindsets in the organization to really adopt Industry 4.0. And after this SIRI assessment, we actually recognize that there are three focus areas they have to really look into, namely integrated product lifecycle, enterprise automations, and of course, shop floor connectivity, right? Integrated product lifecycle, that represent how they manage the product materials, the bill of materials, from not just the end product, but of course, the different raw materials, how they manage the life cycle of that product. Enterprise automation, this is about they have quite a lot of, let's say, unnecessary activities that they have to do,